Okay, so I told you I'm from Utah, and I told you how obsessed I kind of am with Alaska and taking my own boat up the Inside Passage. So, how does a person explain that? How does a Utah boy, landlocked his whole life, fall in love with the Inside Passage to Alaska? Well, that's a darn good question. I'm not really sure how I got started on my obsession with Alaska, but I've always been intrigued by it. I've always wanted to go there. And then when I started in my career as a computer technician, I had the good fortune of being able to go to Ketchikan and Sitka a couple of times on business trips, which was a great way to go. Someone else was paying the flight tickets. Anyway, I wound up going up there. I worked. We did a little bit of exploring around, but not much. It was mostly a business trip. And so it was just enough to kind of whet my appetite about that area. Then, a few years later, all my siblings and my parents got together and we took a cruise to Alaska. So we went up on a cruise ship and we stopped at all the ports of call that everybody stops at, Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway, etc. And it was good. It was fun. It's a cruise ship, so you're packed on there with a ton of people. But there were some really nice times late at night, in particular, when the ship would really quiet down and no one was around, and you could go out on the deck and the stars would be up there by the billions, and the water was flat, and it was just magical. And so I knew I needed to go back. And my dad took me exploring a lot when I was a kid, so I kind of have this desire to take my kids out and show them the world. And so a couple of years ago, the girls and I planned a trip up the Inside Passage on the Alaska Marine Highway on the ferry up there. And so it was a great trip, which I'm going to show you some of it here in a minute. But it was kind of the same thing. At the end of the day, I was going too fast. I wanted to slow down, go exploring. I'd go past all these coves and whatnot, and just wanted to go up there. So I think that's how the obsession's built into where it is today, where I've just got to go back on my own schedule. But let me show you how I got some of that, and maybe by the time you finish watching the next 10 or 15 minutes of video here, maybe you'll feel some of the same way I do. So let's go to Alaska. In this summer of 2017, the girls and I scheduled a trip to Alaska by way of the Alaskan Marine Highway, which is basically the ferry from Bellingham, Washington to Ketchikan, Alaska. So you spend about, I believe it's 38 hours on the ferry. We had a little cabin we slept in. We drove the truck onto there and parked it and got on the boat and rode up there on what I believe was probably some of the smoothest water I've ever been on the ocean. I just could not believe how calm the conditions were on the Inside Passage up there at points. So this was a pretty great trip, a great way to unwind and so forth. But as with every time I've been anywhere on a boat where I'm not in charge, we were going too fast. I wanted to stop and look around, and we basically could never do that. We were on nonstop to Ketchikan. So I loved the trip, loved the comfort of the boat and how great it was, the laid back kind of atmosphere. But the one thing that I was having a problem with was I just wanted to stop and look around. So I got to tell you, if you camp much and you have a camp rig like we do, a Toyota Tacoma with a rooftop tent and a shell and so forth, this is an absolutely fantastic way to go to Alaska up the ferry. You're all set, you've got all your stuff with you, the truck's all loaded up, and I'll tell you what, there is just kind of a magical feeling coming up here in just a couple of seconds as you pull onto the ramp off of the boat and your wheels touch down in Alaska. And it's just amazing. I absolutely loved it. The weather was a little iffy when we got there. It was raining, a little windy, but that was the only day that we really had to worry about the weather, and everything was great after that. So we landed in Ketchikan without incident. We totally enjoyed the ferry ride, and we headed off to go get ourselves situated and do a little Alaska camping.
So this is what it's all about for me. Spending time with my family out in the woods. This particular spot was our first night on Prince of Wales Island, or first morning. The ladies are hanging out in the hammock together, two sisters just chilling over a nice cup of hot chocolate. And then we went exploring, and you can see by these roads here that it's lush up there, and trust me, we found that you could drive on roads like this for hours and hours and hours around Prince of Wales Island. It's huge, and it has dirt roads all over the place. So we did some exploring. We saw the rump of one bear going up into the bushes. We just caught a tiny little glimpse of him. But ultimately we wound up kind of up on the northeastern part of Prince of Wales Island in this little, I think it was called Rat Cove or Rat Bay, and wound up camping for the night there. And I think you'll agree, this has to be about one of the most epic camp spots you could ever hope for. We drove the truck right up basically onto the beach there, or the rocks right by the beach, and had this great little bay all to ourselves for the most part. Over the night, a boat came and pulled in a Nordhaven out in the bay out there, but way far away, didn't bother us. And this was just a magical time. I mean, we were just blown away by the sunset. It seemed to just hang on forever. Here in Utah, the sunsets are nice for a few minutes, and then they just kind of, boom, they're done. Up here in Alaska, the sunset just seemed to go on and on and on for, an unbelievable amount of time. So all too soon, this trip was getting wrapped up, and it was time to get back on the ferry and head back to the mainland. But I'll tell you, I left part of my heart up there in Alaska. And that's the whole reason we're doing this boat thing, so we can go back on our own schedule. So stick with us and let's go exploring.